With the story of Wyatt and his crew of preppers told in parts 1 and 2 of this series, now it's time to put the other preppers of Great Bear Island in the spotlight. Who are they and how are they related to Wyatt? In the conclusion of this series, not only will I finally be able to talk about Tom Joplin extensively, but I will also go over 2 other preppers that I've already covered in the past and provide some concluding thoughts on this network of prepper caches. This is the Preppers of Great Bear Island, Part 3. The Other Preppers. As I mentioned previously, I will finally get to talk about a small side character within the lore of the Long Dark that didn't really have much of a background to them. With the Broken Silence update, not only did we get the story of Sutherland, Wyatt's group of preppers, and an explanation for the existence of the prepper caches, we also got a small piece of new information about Tom Joplin. This bit of info is minor, but it is enough to speculate on and piece together his story. So where do I start? I believe this buffer memory from the rural store in Pleasant Valley tells us where Tom grew up. It mentions that a Linda knew him best from Milton. This makes me believe that Tom was originally from Milton and was good friends with her. Thanks to this buffer memory from Dan Presnell, the owner of the rural store, we know he lived in Skeeter's Ridge, likely moving there at some point. Afterwards, he likely kept in touch with Linda. Sadly, it seems that she got sick and likely died, causing a visible decline that Dan noticed. Judging from the details in the memory, mainly the fact he was saying funny things and looked physically worse, I believe Linda was a sort of anchor between Tom and reality. It is very likely he was facing any number of mental issues and her companionship softened the effects on him. We can only guess that he lived alone, so a lack of social stimulation would likely have been a huge factor for why he had such a rapid decline after her death. Of course, this is assuming she actually died. Couple this with the fact he was a prepper, and it makes sense why he ended up sounding and looking a little crazy shortly after her death. He would have lost his dear friend, severing his only connection to the outside world. Based on my speculations in both videos for the memories of Pleasant Valley, I concluded that both the rural store and Signal Hill buffer memories were written just before the first flare. I'm estimating their timing as a few weeks prior, which would give context to what happened with Tom around that time. Just before the first flare, Tom would disappear. His disappearance would allow the raids on his caches, which were conducted by the Forest Talkers. Considering he was declining physically and mentally after what was likely to be Linda's death, he was potentially careless about the caches, leading to them being discovered. In the documents stashed by Wyatt's group of preppers, they did note that outsiders were catching on to their activities and their caches. They were worried that these outsiders would try to ask for help if and when they needed it, but they only meant for the caches to be for themselves. Based on all the fresh Forest Talker activities in Pleasant Valley, they were very active prior to the first flare. Astrid would run into their caches and collect the various notes related to these raids, which would be part of the Joplin's Bunker raid side quest. Tom's backstory, with the little information we had on him, as well as a healthy amount of speculation, is a lot more extensive than most of the side characters in the lore, but this doesn't even include the new detail from Sutherland's tale. That detail was that Wyatt's first prepper cache belonged to Tom. Tom contracted Wyatt to build him at least 3 prepper caches, but there could very well be another. Considering the Forest Talkers noted he disappeared to who knows where, he most likely went into hiding in a more secluded cache. Despite the prepper cache overhaul as a part of the Tales from the Far Territory expansion, Wyatt's first prepper cache for Tom, which was in Wintermute, was still there in survival mode as a key location for the conclusion of Sutherland's tale. Of course, there was another detail at the end of Sutherland's note to Wyatt that is not as important as the others, but may complete the picture that is Tom. He didn't betray Wyatt. It seems that he might have had more to do with this group of preppers than we realized. He might have even been a good friend to Wyatt. In the end, when the rest of his crew burned him, both physically and metaphorically, Tom was not involved. His cache might have been used, but it is likely he had no idea. Even Sutherland with his fractured mind took note of that. Tom was likely a true friend. Perhaps even a ride or die given the chance, but that chance died within the walls of his cache. This brings me to the other 2 preppers that we know of and the rest of the prepper cache network. To start, I want to say that yes, I believe every prepper cache in Wintermute and survival mode are canonically there, even the ones that used to have a random spawn chance prior to the expansion. I think this is a safe assumption, even though there is a clear disconnect between Wintermute and survival mode. There are also tons of things that directly connect the two, such as the mention of Tom in both, the tales that connect back to Wintermute, and Sutherland himself, as well as some interesting information he provides. Also, yes, every prepper cache was likely built by Wyatt and the other preppers in his group. Their similar designs suggest he built them all. Based on the fact that Tom Joplin was able to contract some caches for himself, it is possible that there are other preppers that did the same thing. Of the two other preppers, the suspicious person from the Blackrock Rumors side quest in episode 4 is an oddball. Not only do they seem to exhibit symptoms of the mysterious illness plaguing Great Bear Island in multiple locations and time periods, but they were also a former inmate at Blackrock. Inside their cache, you can find a medical release form. In the first note they leave behind, there are two interesting details that I failed to notice before. They refer to their prepper cache as old, and they are not addressing this note to any specific person. This tells me that these caches are likely older than we thought, and I can further show evidence of that later. The note not being addressed to anyone specific makes me wonder who exactly they had in mind. In it, they say, "We should be able to wait this thing out there." I believe they intended for another prepper to find that note, as they would know where to find it and the suspicious person. So the suspicious person side quest tells us these caches are a bit older than we thought, and that there might be a larger network of preppers than we thought. I find it curious that the suspicious person cache kind of resembles one of the two versions of the conspiracy theorist cache found in survival mode. Also, the other note found in their cache is called Conspiracy Theories, although it seems to be more about their mysterious past and the symptoms of their illness. I'm not saying that the suspicious person and the conspiracy theorist from Wyatt's crew are the same person, but it's possible. The suspicious person did live up to the start of the Quiet Apocalypse, but the trail goes cold when Will finds their prepper cache in episode 4. Additionally, the conspiracy theorist from Wyatt's crew was at one point associated with the Forest Talkers, judging by the backpack in both versions of their cache. It makes me wonder if they may be related to how the Forest Talkers learned about the cache network. They could be an insider. If you want all the details behind the suspicious person, you can check out their full video which shows their potential relationship with Rudiger's experiment. Finally, there is Hank. While I'm not going to go into full detail on his story, there are two pieces of information from the Hank's Hatch side quest in episode 2 that is of value here. In his Hank's Journal Part 1, he says, "I don't think anyone needs that weird old bunker thing I found." This again tells us the prepper caches on Great Bear Island are older than we think they are. So in Part 1, when I was speculating on when they were completed, I should have specified that it's possible they were built years in advance before the Hatch countermeasure was complete. It's possible the cache network started construction decades ago, but was only ever updated and completed once Wyatt figured out the Hatch countermeasure. The other detail relevant here is that Hank is completely unrelated to the prepper cache network. He found the cache completely abandoned and eventually turned to the idea of prepping while working in the lookout tower in Mystery Lake. If you look inside the caches across the game, they certainly look old. They are structurally damaged from time and from tree roots creeping through the walls. Like I speculated on in the first video, Wyatt and his crew got together over their fear of nuclear annihilation, likely brought on by the Cold War. It's entirely possible that these caches are several decades old, with the modernized Hatch countermeasure only barely being completed before the first flare. And when you take into account Sutherland's fragile memory and the fact he is likely the one that entombed his brother inside Tom's prepper cache, it tells us that Wyatt might have been dead for a long time. Not decades, but maybe several months to a year. No one guessed there was a hidden room inside this cache, until it was time to reveal the truth. If you want the full story for Hank, he also got his own video a while back. I would definitely check it out. While he is not directly related to the main network of preppers, his story explains why he eventually turned to prepping. It's a rather sad story that you can miss if you don't stumble upon it in Wintermute episode 2. On a final note, I almost completely forgot about the Aurora Hatch side quest from episode 2. The note that directs you to it was signed by G. We don't know the actual name, but it is likely they were associated with the prepper cache network. The note, Aurora Hatch Door Entry Code, tells us the cache owner left the island because of some treatment they needed to redo. I'm not sure what this treatment is for, though. The most important part of this side quest is the fact the main cache room is blocked by an electrical door. So there were other countermeasures in place, but for some reason Wyatt's crew of preppers wanted to complicate things with an explosive device. Additionally, the note that leads you to the Aurora Hatch was left behind for a Deb at the Hunting Lodge, the Forest Talker headquarters. I think there is no doubt that the Forest Talkers had infiltrated the Prepper Cache network, potentially planting people so they could take advantage of it. This concludes the Preppers of Great Bear Island miniseries. It's crazy to think how we were caught off guard by the release of Sutherland's Tale, which provided a ton of new lore to go through. It was a welcome addition to the world of the Long Dark. Sutherland, Wyatt, and his crew of preppers have had a monumental impact on the story of the island and side characters I never thought we'd hear about again. It even gave us a reason to look back on older topics and the lore of the other random preppers. They have also shaped our understanding of the dark secrets hidden behind sealed caches and entombed in the walls around us. Although, I guess the Tales trilogy set that precedent first. While the story of Hank and the suspicious person hasn't changed much, it's nice to see another side character like Tom Joplin get a little bit more love in the lore. It makes me wish Hinterland could one day create something that can allow them to tell more stories for people like Tom. Heck, if they don't do it, I might just have to do it myself. Funny thing is, I already started doing it. Even if this apocalypse is here to stay, every long dark tunnel has light at the other end. All one can hope is to live long enough to see the beauty in between the darkness and the light.